Bueno, muy buenos días a todos. Estamos acá con Jack, con Per y con Ker también, contentos de iniciar un nuevo webinar y bueno, esperemos que sea del agrado de todos. Primero, me gustaría agradecer a Pacific Business School, con quien compartimos un propósito similar. El de ellos es potenciar el liderazgo responsable de los ejecutivos y la verdad que le damos la bienvenida a todos aquellos que hacen inscripto a través de la invitación que compartió la Pacífico, y intentaremos desafiarlos para que puedan crecer como personas y como profesionales. Así que bienvenidos a todos aquellos que ingresaron a través de la invitación de la Universidad del Pacífico. Y siguiendo con el propósito, el nuestro, el de Vistas, es ayudarlos a tomar mejores decisiones. Y en este día 80 de cuarentena, les traemos un nuevo webinar. Quienes son miembros de Vistas saben que fuimos recorriendo este camino juntos, y al finalizar este webinar les compartiremos aprendizajes que los miembros de Vistas Perú nos contaron que estuvieron, o lecciones que estuvieron aprendiendo a lo largo de este periodo. Hay muchas que seguramente ya saben, hay muchas que conocemos, pero creemos que siempre suma hacer visible lo invisible. Así que en este webinar, que es el número 12 que hacemos desde Vistage Perú, también aprovecho para decirles que no dejen de ingresar a la página de Leading in Challenging Times dentro de My Vistage, a todos los que son miembros, para poder acceder a los webinars que está haciendo Vistage Worldwide, que son con quizás los speakers o profesores más reconocidos del mundo. Estoy hablando de Lencioni, Jim Collins, Amy Edmondson, entre otros. Pueden compartirlos con sus equipos también. Así que, dicho eso, queríamos presentarles este mes a Per Kristiansen, que nos va a hablar acerca de estrategia. Per es coautor de la metodología Lego Serious Play, ha sido consultor para empresas en Europa, América, Asia, Medio Oriente, hace más de 15 años. Y hoy Per nos ayudará a pensar y elaborar estrategias para que nuestras organizaciones puedan crecer, aún frente a eventos adversos, mediante la creación de estas estrategias que ayuden a generar crecimiento, sin importar el contexto, ¿no? Vuelvo a mencionar el tema del contexto. Per lidera Trivium con su hermano Ker también, y creo que en Perú vamos a ser muy suertudos, porque Jack Raymond, quienes muchos conocen, y además de ser miembro de Vistage, también fue speaker de algunos de sus grupos, está liderando la expansión de Trivium y abriendo aquí en Perú, así que lo que haga Per hoy lo vamos a poder tener aquí localmente también. Así que yo dejo de compartir. Per, te dejo a ti para que puedas compartir tu pantalla. No quiero dejar de decir que, como ustedes saben, hay un chat, y en el chat la idea es poder compartir preguntas y demás. Jack las va a estar levantando. No hace falta que sean en inglés, pueden ser en castellano, para después poder hacer una ronda de preguntas y respuestas. Más o menos piensen que Per va a estar hablando unos 45 minutos, y después vamos a dejarnos unos 15-20 minutos para hacerles preguntas a ellos. Así que, Per, all yours. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Your show.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go and share my screen. There you go, guys. So thank you very much, Ignacio, for the introduction and for hosting us and welcome us to this. So here's the title: The Winning Hand and Playing Ahead. This is what we think we're going to be talking about. So as I believe you said, Ignacio, to my Spanish at least, in terms of questions, if you have them, throw them into the chat. We'll take moments just to pause and check if there are any questions that I should answer urgently. Jack is going to keep a keen eye on that and then help me understanding the questions, so I can focus on sharing with you what we plan to share. We also have a closing question and answers at the end. I'm going to speak in English, obviously, and as Ignacio said, you can ask your questions in Spanish. I'm going to do my very best to speak reasonably slowly and easy to understand. Otherwise, if there are things that seems unclear because of my English, also feel free to put that into the chat to ask me just to return to a given thing, and I'll share it again. I'm aiming for speaking for the 45 minutes, as you mentioned also, Ignacio, so we have a nice closing at the end. The purpose, or maybe we should call it the focus of these 44 minutes that we have left, is to explore a little bit the definition of strategy. Because strategy can mean many different things. And it's one of those words that if you start opening it up and not taking it for granted, there might be different things in that meaning. Then we have thrown ahead this idea, this concept of the winning hand. So we're going to dive in a little bit into what do we mean with these concepts. What does the winning hand cover as a metaphor? And what do we mean when we say play ahead? What does that actually mean? So that's sort of the purpose and the focus of the next 45 minutes. It says 60 here, but we're going to go 45, including the opening here. So we'll do a little bit of an intro and bio. I know Ignacio was kind enough to share some info about me. I'll do a little bit more. We'll sort of dive into that, getting that key a bit of language here, and just some key understandings. And then deeper into the notion of strategy, deeper into the notion of play, and also talking a little bit about why is play essential for work, because that can seem paradoxical or even counterintuitive, especially in days like this, where many of us are probably finding ourselves in really challenging situations. And then we have the closing observations and questions in the remaining 15 or 20 minutes or so. So first things first, a little bit of timeline and bio, so you have a sense of who's sitting with you from Copenhagen. More years ago than I really care to think of, I have a degree from Copenhagen Business School. So a master in change and intercultural management. Then I sort of pretended to be a management consultant for a while, working out of Copenhagen. Then I joined like a company, which is what took me into something called executive discovery, and we're going to come back to this probably a few times, but this was a little startup initiated by the owner of Lego. And this is where we developed Lego Serious Play, as Ignacio also hinted to. This was in 2001. And so I was part of developing this method and became part of developing this method, right? And I became a partner in Trivium. I was part of founding something called the Association of Master Trainers in this methodology. I'm a master trainer, a trainer, and a facilitator, and there's slightly different roles here. And a co-author of a book about building a better business with Lego Serious Play. So these are sort of the headlines. I also had little bits other projects here and there just to keep an open mind. I've co-owned a restaurant, and currently with my wife, I own a beauty salon in Copenhagen, and I'm a shareholder in a training and development company. So sort of this notion of having exploring and strategizing in many different ways, I guess you could say, is sort of my little key interest. So this is just to give you the idea of who's sitting here. Now, LinkedIn, I think that's where most of us connect these days. So just throwing this one out right now, I'm happy to connect with you guys on LinkedIn, and I'll show this one again later, so don't worry about it. But now, just to plant it in the back of your head. Now, the winning hand. This metaphor, let's call it that, comes from a phrase here from The Gambler by Kenny Rogers, where he says that every hand is a winner. The reason why we really like this as a metaphor in relation to strategy is twofold. So every hand is a winner. It's partly because of the card, that any card that you are played, you can make that a winning set of cards. You just need, as Kenny Rogers also says, you need to know when to hold them, when to fold them, when to walk away, or when to run. I'm not going to sing that because I cannot sing. But this notion, we like it because this notion of it doesn't matter which cards you get in your hand. If you play them correctly, it can be a winning set of cards. It can be a winning hand. So the metaphor works for us in strategy that way. And considering the COVID-19 and what we're all struggling with right now, we believe that this is a really important metaphor to notice that you're played a set of cards here, you can make them a winner. The other side to this metaphor, which is essential for the approach we then take, is this notion of the hand. Every hand is a winner. What we want to make here, the point we want to make here is that what the potential or the source for your winning, is your hand. So right here, every hand is a winner. Every hand is super connected to the brain. That's what this little hominoid here the Natural Historic Museum of London shows. So every hand is a winner, every set of cards holds a victory, and every single hand is highly connected with the brain. So by engaging your hands, you have an opportunity to win. Hence this power of this double metaphor, hence the power of this double metaphor. But let's go back to this notion of that every single hand can be a winning hand, depending on how you decide to play it, depending on the decisions you make once you have this card. We're going to pursue that part of the metaphor first. So here the definition of strategy becomes important, because strategy, means a lot of different things. For now, we're going to pause with saying that strategy is an instrument that helps make decisions with intention. Whether you are playing cards, running your company, or pursuing finding your significant other, strategy is simply an instrument that helps you make decisions with intent so you achieve what you're striving for. That is strategy. That is strategy. So you want to put this simply. Strategy is the instrument that helps you move from a given state, current state, towards a desired state over here. And when everything goes well, that instrument creates this beautiful straight line for you, right? It tells you, it guides you, it helps you make decisions so you move from who you are to who you want to be. Now, in good days, or for most of us, let's say this, most of us typically see the instrument here as a plan. And a plan is an excellent strategy instrument as long as these following requirements are in place for you. If you operate in a predictable and stable environment, right, where the plan can help you make decisions, right? When speed in changing decision-making is not an issue. So the point here is not the speed in your decision-making, it's the speed with which you might change your decision-making. If that speed is not important, then the plan is an excellent instrument. If you need to control decision-making down in the smallest details, like if you're making Boeing 747s, or if you were developing a medicine or a vaccine against the COVID-19, then you need to control the smallest details. And when you have time to wait for a new plan, should the first one not work? When these conditions are present, strategy as a plan, or the plan as an instrument, is an excellent approach to strategy. Where plan comes up short, right? When the plan comes up short is when you need to be able to swiftly and with intent handle black and white swans. And these concepts we borrow from Taleb, or we use them from Taleb. Black and white swans, right? The black ones are utterly unforeseeable and utterly unpredictable. The white ones are actually foreseeable. We can know that they will happen, but they are not predictable, so we don't know why they happen. So the COVID-19, by this definition, is actually a white swan. People knew that it was very likely to happen. It was just unpredictable when. So if you need to be able to swiftly and with intent act, then the plan comes up short here. If your environment, if your landscape, if your competition is dynamic, unstable, and unpredictable, the plan is a problem. So therefore, if fast decision-making is critical, the plan slows you down. If you trust people to make the right decisions without being micromanaged, the plan might actually also not be the right thing, because you're taking decision-making away from the people that are closest to your clients, for example. And also, if it's okay that decisions differ, as long as you achieve your goal, the plan is also not your best instrument. So this journey works when there is this predictability, when we are on the left hand of the previous slide. Once you move away from that, this journey ends up looking like this, somewhat less attractive for most of us. Because here, there's an unpredictable world. There's an unstable world. It's not linear. So when we make one of the decisions that we had planned to do, the world responds in a way we had not foreseen. And then we lose our track, and our journey, instead of the green one, ends up this weird one where we get lost and we are down here with a question mark. And if we stay with the plan, we now need to wait and see, create a new plan, and we lose to our competition in the meantime. Our clients move away, basically. So what we need then instead is a strategy that can help us do this. explore, and experiment. This is where we find the decision-making distributed. The decision-making happens out with your employees, with your colleagues. So we need to open up our understanding of strategy. We need to find and accept that there are different instruments that can all help us strategize, i.e. make decisions so that we become what we are striving for. So we need to open up our definition of strategy. We need to open up our understanding of what instruments are there for us to make strategic decisions. So let's kind of dive into this, because we can actually map that whole portfolio of instruments. So we're going to pause a little bit here and just kind of go into this little map here, right? Because we can decide to consider the starting point of our strategy from, let's start from the bottom here. We can consider the starting point down here. Where am I looking from? Where am I starting the development of the formation of my instrument, of my strategy? Positioning means that we take the starting point from the outside of ourselves. We do not consider ourselves first. We look at our market, we look at our competition, we look at the growth patterns, we look at all the external factors, suppliers, substituting products, alternative products, so forth and so on, and we find a position that's relevant for us, right? We take a positioning-based approach. Now, the opposite to that, which is up here, bear with me with the drawing here, is the resource-based perspective. That means that we are starting from our inside. So we're looking at what are the resources we possess, what are the capabilities we have, what are the competencies we have, what is our physical location, which opportunities does our location grant us. Earlier today, Ignacio, Jack, and I had a little conversation about Venice. Venice was a powerful city-state in Europe centuries ago because of their location next to the sea, towards the Near Orient, and therefore well adapted to trading. So we can start our strategy from our resources, our position. Right? Now, these two starting points are choices we can make independent of the nature of our surrounding world, in the sense. Independent from the market conditions I spoke about, moving from an A to a B. But we need to figure out, do I want to build from what I have, finding my strengths, our competences, our skills and capabilities, or do I want to build from the external world, finding a niche that seems to be attractive, bear with me, attractive, independent from the skills we have internal from us. So those are two different approaches, two different perspectives that we might want to take on this. Now, adding to that, now we're getting closer to what we were talking about before, because we can take this planned approach out here, where we have assumptions about stability, about a linearity, so we can foresee the consequences of our actions. If I do this, it will lead to that. If I lower my price, demand will go like this. If I grow by 10%, I will win, so forth and so on. We have linearity, stability, and predictability. If we don't think we have that kind of world, well, then we are over here in this world that we have over here, right? And I think most of us in the current situation feel that our world is not predictable, it's not linear. So we tend to be thinking about, how can we handle this world? Whether we take a resource-based perspective, whether we start from a position-based perspective, we are accepting that, hey, the strategy emerges through the pattern of our decisions. Sometimes the quadrant over there is called learn strategy, because we need to act and learn, act and learn, act and learn. This is the kind of strategy that tends to work best for dynamic environments. So now we have a little bit of a map where we can start talking about our strategy. Now, clearly what I'm showing here are extremes, right? You can argue that you might take an approach which is mostly positioning, but not entirely, right? You might try and balance a planned approach with an emergent approach. These are just extremes to help us get a language about where are we, where do we want to be, how are we working with strategy, what kind of instrument are we putting together. Now, with this in mind, and sort of going over here, we need to say, how can we create an emergent strategy? Because there are some, rephrase that, historically, there's been some challenges in doing that. Because emergent strategy thinking, historically, has taken a little bit the approach of, and let's see, we need to do some drawing here, is that you have a situation here. I'm going to see if I can draw a little person, whoopsie, with a little bit of Wi-Fi delay here. The drawing becomes a little bit interesting, but imagine that here you are, metaphorically, your company, right? Today, this is where we are. Now, Emergent strategy has historically said that strategy can actually only be observed as the pattern of decisions that took you from who you were, and then we have, remember that blue line, from who you were to who you are today. It's only in the pattern of your past decisions you can see the nature of the strategy. Now, for most people, for most company owners such as yourself, or leaders such as yourself, this may feel a little bit of a tricky thing, because the academics out here, they would say that the only thing you can really then do is to get the right people on board, right? You can get the right people on board. And then, oopsie, get the right people on board. And then give them a challenge to go out here. Say, all righty, you now need to go out here and find and make the decisions that takes you to who you want to be. Ooh, bear with me, guys. We're having a little bit of a discussion here with my tablet. Back up here. So you want to go from this, right? There you go. So get the right people on board so you can get out here, achieve your vision, and get that medal and be #1 in your market. Now, for most leaders and managers, this is not quite enough, just getting the people on board, allowing them to make decisions, and then we'll get there. So this is where we come back to the playing. Because you can actually develop a strategy that enables people to make those decisions when the unforeseen happens. And this is where we start introducing play. Because when you play, you explore and you experiment. So you can imagine future events, future decisions, and you pull them in to the current state. Now we start playing in order to develop our strategy. So we're not saying anything out here will happen, but through our thinking with play and through our playing, we imagine possible future situations that we pull into the current situation, developing actions, developing principles, developing guidance, and a compelling vision that enables our employees, that enables our leadership team to make the decisions correctly, so that we actually develop an emergent strategy. So instead of waiting, making the decisions and seeing the pattern in the past, we actually can play so that we create one right now that helps us act strategically when something happens. So this is where play becomes an exceptionally important tool for us. And what we need to just pause in here is and to accept that play is not a frivolous thing. It's not something that human beings, no matter the age, it's not something they do in order to take a break from work or a break from learning or a break from development. It's an immensely serious thing that we do in order to develop as human beings. So far so good. Jack, any questions that we should just handle right now? No? Excellent, I'll continue. So with this definition, with this thinking about strategy, let's go, I took a step back here. We're thinking with this map of strategy, with accepting that play is not a frivolous thing, that it's not a break from work, but it is part of work as a human being. Let's take a little bit closer look at what does play mean, what defines play, and why does it work, and how can it help us in creating that winning hand that we referred to earlier. First of all, we need to just pause and take a little bit of a look at a starting point, because there's clearly something that needs to be unlocked here. A few years ago, well, it's getting to be a number of years ago, the Lego Foundation did a rather large research project to sort of score people in different ages in terms of their creative thinking. And this is what came out. This seems, to me at least, to indicate that there is a bit of an urgency . Your creative thinking score just plummets. So it's getting harder and harder for us to think. So something needs to be broken here. Something needs to change here. So what seems to be needed change in leadership mindset, in strategy development, if you want, where we start focusing on unlocking potential rather than knowing what we know. What seems to be needed is an approach that helps us all to break our habitual patterns of thinking. So let's take a look at this. Each of these three characteristics or things that are needed. This is a 2080 meeting. I fear that many of you will recognize these meetings. We call this a 2080 meeting because 20% of the people are speaking 80% of the time. This character up here, he's in absolute control. So 20% of the people are speaking 80% of the time. These other 80% are not contributing. They are not engaged. They are not active. They are not creating new knowledge. The man with the flip chart does the thinking, does the sharing. This is an issue because when you create conversations, you bring understanding. And if there's one thing we do now, it's understanding. It is new knowledge. So what we want to do is want to move from these 20, or what we need to do is to move from these 2080 meetings into these 100 meetings. Now this is an example from a workshop, but the point here is that when we create 100 meetings, typically with the use of play, one play method or another, we create 100. And it's called 100 because 100% of the people are engaged and involved 100% of the time. This is what we also sometimes call a leaning in meeting. Because everybody's leaning in, everybody's contributing, instead of the 2080 where they're leaning out and not contributing. And in the current economy, with all the challenges in getting together and meeting, when we meet, we need to meet in a way where everybody is present, where everybody is contributing. And we need these things to develop strategies that are different and that are unique and that are powerful, and which becomes the winning hand. Unlocking potential. So the 100 is a requirement. Human beings, the way we seem to be working, because nobody really knows how a human being works, is that all things equal, we know a lot more than we know. And when we are not developing new knowledge, when we're not engaging in play, when we are talking from PowerPoints like we're doing now or listening to someone else, it's all about what's up here. It's all about what we know. But if we want to win, if we want to be unique, we need to be able for each person to engage into this down here, into what they don't know they know. And again, play can help us do that. The hands can help us do this. They can help us engage with what we don't know we know. Habitual patterns of thinking. Human beings, possibly all mammals, we think in patterns. We need to break these patterns. Patterns helps us act real fast. We see a pattern that we recognize, the X, and then we apply the solution we've always applied. This is really fast decision making. Or in terms of a plan, we see a pattern that we recognize. It seems to look like something that we know. We go to the plan tells us what to do. If it doesn't work, if you remember the red line from before, we go off track. So what we need to do is we need to break the habitual pattern of thinking. Yes, we do see this, but we associate it with many different possible right solutions so that we subsequently can choose the solution that helps us best. Again, if you remember the drawing where we took the X in the future and we pulled it into the now, that's a way of associating and helping to play out different possible right solutions to a given possible future event or action from your competitor or a request from a client. So you're testing out, you're playing out your different decisions so that you move beyond the first and obvious one. It's mentioned a few times, the hand can really help us do this as a way of thinking, because the hand is closely connected to the brain. The hand is roughly or more or less indirectly towards directly connected with 80% of your brain. So by using your hands, by engaging your hands, you're engaging more parts of your brain. We are three-dimensional beings, and these are closely connected to that. So the winning hand is part of, as I said, the set of cards on your hand and the fact that you're accessing, that you're leveraging your hands when you go into this. So the hand-brain connection in itself is beneficial. The other part was play. We've spoken a lot about play, spoken about how playing the hand correctly is an access or a way for success. The thing about play is that it's really hard to define. It's very easy to do, and we all do it. As a species, we are the species that, probably the only species actually, that biologically are wired to play through our entire lifetime. That doesn't mean we always do it, but biologically, it's a natural thing for us to do. But it's very hard to define it, basically because it's very hard to do research on play, because how do you can't bring play into a lab and do the classical research. You can't do a double blind where one group doesn't play and one group plays, and then you learn the difference. So researching and defining play can be difficult. So it needs to be researched with animals. Now, there are many kinds of play. When we talk about play in the context of work, and typically also in the context of adults, we work typically with one definition of play, which highlights why it is so important. First of all, when adults play, when we play in organization, it's in the format of, it's in the format of an intentional gathering. So we plan to meet. We meet on purpose. We meet in order to apply our imagination. So we know we're going to imagine things. When we do this, when we do these imaginations of the future, we follow a specific set of rules or a specific language we may not follow in any other or any different context. As we do it, we're exploring and experimenting. We are not implementing. So by these, when we look at these definitions closely, we will notice that this means that most knowledge workers are at play most of the time. If you look at these, notice that stuff like strategy making in general, budgeting, creating business models, these all play. Because when we budget, we meet to imagine what we may sell in the future, where we may produce it, what's the price we're going to charge for it. We are not actually selling it. We are not actually producing it. We're not actually hiring these people. We're not actually entering into the Colombian market. We are imagining that we will do it. And we follow a specific language, budgeting, numbers, calculations, regression analysis, that we may not follow anywhere else. So the point here is not necessarily to bring more play into your organizations, but to bring better play into organizations. So to be intentional about your play, to really leverage play, so that you really unleash the imagination, so that you have these clear set of rules and language when you play. Because this also creates a boundary which makes it safe for people to do the different associations that break their habitual patterns of thinking. That means that they are unlocking their potential and fully accepting that when we do these things, we are exploring, we are experimenting. And then once we developed all of this, right, then we are ready to go and implement. And then we bring it back to work. Then we start executing the strategy. So this is the definition of play that we would like you to bring with you back home. This notion of knowing these things and being intentional and specific about this. So what does it seem to do to the brain? And most of this is based on animal research, because most parents don't like researchers to split up the heads of their children. So from a biological perspective, it's a two-way street, meaning that play impacts the growth of the brain. It releases more neurotransmitters. You simply develop your brain while you're at play. It becomes more flexible, actually. You make different associations. But the more you play, so the more you play, the more your brain develops. But the more developed your brain is, the more complex your play becomes. So it's a two-way street. You play, your brain is developed. Your brain is developed, you play more complex. So it's Stuart Brown, who is a famous researcher in play, calls it a fertilizer for the brain. He even goes as far as to say that it is madness not to use play, because there's nothing as fertilizing for the brain. So if you want to go beyond the 5 to 10% in the previous triangle and grow the brain and grow knowledge, play is a classic. From a social perspective, it seems that it doesn't depend on the size of the cortex, but it creates social bonding. And people, and this does include humans, who are active in play and who is allowed to play, they become better at handling conflicts. They become better at emotional calibration, meaning reading others, but also applying the correct response. And again, if we think of the reality that most of us are part now, handling conflicts, calibrating our emotional response to different situations are exceptionally important. Play also prepares us for ambiguity, something that I believe again, or we believe again, that most of us are really faced with right now. It helps us test, rehearse, and hone our skills. There's notion of practicing our decisions, practicing our strategic decision making. So, Jack, I'm taking a quick look at you for questions. Very good. Fantastic. So, a moment here on winning by playing ahead. So how can one imagine doing that? With all the stuff we've said so far, which has generically been about the concept of strategy, the map of different kinds of strategy, suggesting play as a means for developing the strategy, whether emergent or actually as a plan. Right now, with the current situation that we are facing as business, McKinsey, and we're going to base ourselves a little bit on McKinsey, suggests to apply 5 frames for strategizing. And these are frames, so you can also consider them as lenses. So you look through these in order to be ready to seize the post-lockdown market, or even better, to create the post-lockdown market. So it's really looking at your starting position. It is exploring futures, and this is deliberately with an S. It's building scenarios, but it's also playing out unforeseeable events. So futures in plural. We do not want here to start predicting. So we're going to have a number of futures in order to test decisions, right? In order to be able to see what's happening, we need to imagine things before we see them. We need to set our aspiration and direction in parallel with this. This means external or to what's going on. Who is it that we want to be? Which is the direction we want to go in? We need to iteratively define actions and moves we want to take and principles that are going to guide us while making decisions. We need to iteratively identify trigger points and signposts in our moving forward, so that when we reach a given moment, we see a signpost, and that can initiate either a warning signal or a new set of actions for us. So we have this foreseeing or this mapping going on so that we make qualified decisions. Importantly here is then, and this is where it's very, very hard to do without play, we would say, is to take these 5 lenses and make certain that they don't become isolated, more like towers than lenses, and continuously through an acting and learning process, creating a synchronization between the frames so that there is a continuous integrated or synchronized move forward where they're building on top of each other and are positively impacting each other so that they're constantly basically synchronized and creates a momentum, a positive momentum. So you can plan ahead or play ahead. When you plan, you're more in creating these teams that are focused on the future, doing the analytical work where they're working across the 5 frames, and then decisions are made by the CEO. So this is really the plan approach. Or we just took some pictures. There are some Lego Serious Play workshops, or you can use play as a means of unlocking the potential in each and unlocking potential in all in order to surface these insights and creating, as you will see down to the right there, landscapes where you can play out the futures, where you can explore reactions in your environment. So you can do a sort of planning approach, or you can do the more sort of playing ahead approach in order to create that desired future and that responsiveness in your organization. Now, it's probably less of a surprise that our mindset is that of complexity, unstable, understanding the environment is unstable, as volatile and as complex. So our inclination is to say that play right now is a good approach. Emergent strategy is a good approach to the environment we're in. Question is why and why now? Well, first of all, if we look at our current situation, right? The lockdown, the COVID-19, the corona pandemic. As I understand it, in Peru, you are about 80 days into your lockdown. Denmark is sort of coming out of our approximately 100-day lockdown. The quarantine, the lockdown, is not half time in a football game. I believe you guys call it football, Jack, or do you call it soccer? Are you more just football, right? So you're more European than American. Thank you very much. So we're not in half time in a football game where the game is just on pause. And when we come back from the break, we're going to play football like we did before. So we're not in a half time. The second half, the next normal, is going to be hard. It's going to be different. And it's going to be different in unpredictable ways. So if we stay with the football metaphor, it's not like we have our 15 minutes break, we're having our tea or whatever they have when they have their breaks, and we know that we're going to have a different second half. And we also know how that second half is going to be. Now, the only thing we know now is that the second half is going to be different. There might be different players, there might be different rules, there might be 5 referees. The only thing we can really know right now is it's going to be different, and that it might change a lot as it gets started again. So we're going to go somewhere different. To be real honest with you, there are a lot of people that are making predictions about how the next normal, or as they like to call it, the new normal, is going to be. But this is really, really, we would argue, tricky and dangerous. 100 days ago, none of us had really imagined the pandemic. So how can we then sit today in an unimaginable current state and pretend that we can predict the next normal? We couldn't even predict the current normal. And the next one is not going to be less tricky, less difficult, and less predictable. So this is not half time. Next normal is going to be really, really hard. And it's going to be hard in ways that's very, very, not very difficult. Let's argue, unpredictable, impossible to predict. So the reason why we would say play as a way of strategizing, as a way of developing your strategy, the reason why we say try and play ahead, is because when you play, new insights are being developed. And insights, remember this, insights are these bursts of new knowledge, which is hard to say where they came from, but they came. This is this notion of what the brain does, what play does for your brain. So you get new insights when you play. When insights are created, when people feel that insights are unlocked, they are more confident in the choices that are being made. When people are more confident in the direction, in the moves, in the actions, when they feel more confident about the aspiration, when they feel more confident that we've understood the current situation we're in, all of these things that were important in the 5 frames, when they feel confident about that, when they feel confident even the quiet people were heard, then they feel committed. And commitment is the voluntary choice of acting when nobody's looking. Everything else is management or brute force. But if you want to go fastest out of the starting blocks and create the next normal or conquer the next normal, you need qualified, aligned, and synchronized decisions all the way around. And that only happens if everybody who's making decisions are making the right decisions, and they only do that if they're committed. If they dare stick out their neck when nobody's looking. And they only dare that if they're confident. And they only dare that if the insights have been unlocked. So speed and execution, right? So the pace and the quality, if you want, are becoming essential. With rapid changes and unpredictable changes, you need to maximize your learning, if you want to call it like this, at the periphery of the organization as well, or at all over basically. But you only do that if there's an aligned, intentional, and synchronized decision-making going on. And that comes through the commitment. Good so far? So this was, to my knowledge, a little bit more than 40 minutes, not quite 45. So I'm going to take us here now and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Per. A los que tengan preguntas, que quieran hacerlas a Per, las pueden escribir por el chat. Jack, no sé si quieres decir algo.
You're very quiet, Jack.
Aclarando a ver si hay alguna duda sobre lo conversado, cómo pueden llevarlo a cabo, sería genial. Ahí tenemos algo.
I have one. How do you exercise place in an organization that's not physical? Ooh, Jose Gamero has a question in English, so I can go directly to that. Oh, Jose, this is really a difficult one, right? I would totally agree with you, because we tend to think of play as something that happens when we're together in the same room. But there are different techniques and technologies for going with play. I'm going to first go with the version of play that I mostly work with myself, which is this Lego series play, hence the photo there. Now you can actually use play, the Lego series play, sorry, while people are in different rooms. They just need to have Lego bricks. So they can engage in playing with the Lego bricks there, going deeper in that triangle, and then sharing. But you can play in many different ways. So different technologies like mural, or using metaphors. You can, like cutting them out from photos. So you can actually create the boundaries of play in a reasonably good manner remotely as well. Creating some rules about how we speak. For example, turn taking. Something like Pecha Kucha, which you may know, which is a fast way of iterating PowerPoints, can be a way of even do a playful presentation. But using murals, using different kinds of visuals, doing the Lego series play, creating special rules. I'm just going to see if I can find a really fast random example in my office space here. Now here I have a dog, right? I have a soft spot for toys. Here's a really old dog. So you can even, let's see if you can find, you can even ask people to take random metaphors and say, so how can X be like a duck? These are really, really, really simple examples, right? But creating that playful atmosphere, allowing people to have associations, making them feel safe and making them know that they can't be wrong. These are ways of creating reasonably good remote play, other than Lego series play, which is the one that I know most, but you can definitely do it. But just needing to create that space, have the rules clear, use prompts a lot. Like physical artifacts that creates associations. Yeah, I hope that helped a little bit.
Could I just could I just add one thing to Per's answer? So exercising, playing, organizing that physically together. One thing that's extremely important is creating the trust. Creating the trust so everyone will actually pitch in. And that's how, when Per was referring to rules and set up condiments, basically having those conditions in place, making it a trusting environment where everything is actually okay. You're not necessarily, every answer is actually a right answer. Because that kind of gives the possibility of having everything out on the floor and actually unlocking each person's own potential and creating that environment where everything actually is okay.
Yeah, just building on that, and then let's take some of the other questions. Again, like the course said this thing about people can't be wrong. You can even adapt the questioning technique that we use in Lego series play. When someone is asking a question to another person in Lego series play, they can only ask in terms of exploring what the person said. So physically saying, does that mean anything? Or da, 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 da. So it's not challenging. It's asking the question from the assumption that it means something and that it is right. Yeah, I just don't know yet how it is right. So these are different ways of asking questions that also allows for a safe space, as Cole said, and a playful interaction. Jack, I need help with Guillermo's question.
So we have a lot of questions on both chats.
Okay.
The Guillermo question is about implementing this method, which means doing a lot in this concept of social distancing and home office, which I feel that you've answered a little bit before.
Yeah, maybe I did. I hope, Guillermo, I hope I did.
So it's all about how you do this while social distancing.
Yeah. I was thinking if there was something there I didn't answer. But I think just in terms of a conversation I had with a client recently, this notion of they found themselves, they're a Scandinavian organization. So they're a Scandinavian organization, and in each country, they're slightly on different markets. So their markets are currently at different stages in the opening up, in the post-lockdown, if you want, right? So from their home offices, they're also applying a little bit a playful approach so that the markets, the markets that are opening fastest for them, and geographically it's Denmark, and in terms of industries, it's their retail. They're experimenting on that market really fast to develop knowledge that they're gonna use in their other markets when they open up. So that's in a sense actually applying a playful approach to the opening of their market. I hope that helped a little bit, Guillermo, as well. Otherwise, it is back to what I said with Jose. Then in the Q&A, we have Enrique. What would you recommend to do in order to not get lost in the day-to-day one? Ooh.
Yeah.
Enrique, I believe a lot in actually forcing my time boxing upon myself and others. It is, I think what you're saying as well, it is so easy to get lost. And the less you play, the more busy you are, because you never really think ahead and you make a lot of mistakes. It's that red thing, right? Because you get lost and you go into that whirlpool. So for me, there is actually time boxing and forcing, in the beginning, actually forcing yourself to play on a given thing. I think another thing also, this is a conversation I had with a different client. They found that their remote meetings took sometimes longer than their in-person meetings. And when we started to talk about what they were doing in their meetings, this is a global company here, so they were in different time zones. And when we started looking into what they were actually doing in these meetings, was they were doing way too much, let's call it 2080 stuff. They were doing stuff in that meeting where people didn't actually need to be sitting together in the same time, at the same time. So it was much more information stuff. That meant that most of them were actually wasting their time that they used for playing, because it takes longer sometimes to hear someone talk something through than it does to read it yourself and consume it at your own pace in the moment that works best for you. So they put a lot of structure actually on the info sharing, which is typically work, and the reporting back. By putting structure on that and really accepting, do we actually need to be in the room to do this? They liberated room or space, if I should call it, time, I should call it. They liberated time that enabled them to play more. So they actually are in the process of shifting their meetings from reporting back in a 2080 manner to saying that actually happens offline, not in person, but offline, so that when we are online, we can use play on the topics that help them at least.
Yeah.
Could I just add one?
Yeah.
Jack, go ahead. I'll wait.
No, as you mentioned before, Per, that play is not this frivolous thing, right? So of course, this notion of play can feel like you're wasting time. And actually having this characteristics of, as you were saying, the 20-80 meeting turning into 100 meeting, that's giving a start point to have better meetings and more playful meetings.
Sure, that's important. Cole, 1 second, Cole, before you go. I think the point that Jay is also making here is this notion of, as a whole in the organization, giving play credibility.
Yeah.
Not seeing it as a break also helps people. I have one more point, but Cole, I interrupted you, so please dive in.
No, it's quite. I was adding the notion of actually having it as a value and actually agreeing upon it as a value to be playful, and then set up the structure that actually creates, and that's what Piers also talking about, systematically structuralized time for play. I work with a global launch team where they actually used Lego Serious Play to build the 6 values. They were going to carry them on, and now they're actually moving into behaviors of how actually to exercise this, and that creates that new default position where you actually, instead of maybe going into doing stuff as you used to, now you're going to do it in the new way. And here they work together, they play together, and created a shared understanding of this was how they want to move forward with the launch of a new product.
Yeah, I'm going to just try an analogy, and then we have a question from Gabriel Enrique. I hope this works for you. But this finding this time is almost like it's almost the same challenge that many people have when they want to take up exercising, right? Running or doing an hour in the gym. Before they do it, they go like, "Wow, how the beep." Am I gonna find time to run for 45 minutes every day? Or how am I gonna find time to go to the gym? The moment when they, in a disciplined manner, always set aside this time, let's say it's a 45-minute run every morning. What they typically find is that by doing that, they have more time for the other stuff they need to do. Because by doing that, they're working wonders for their brain. And what exercise does to the brain could be another presentation some other time. But the funny thing is that stuff like play and exercise does fantastic things to our brains, which means that when we are at work, not at play, but at exercise, when we're implementing, we implement faster because we have a healthier brain. As an analogy, that might also be a way of thinking it. So Gabriel is asking, is this approach valid for either mature and growing markets or more appropriate for growing ones? Gabriel, I'm going to try and answer your question in 2 lines. If I approach your thinking nature of strategy, so what instrument should I apply? Should I apply emergent strategy or should I apply planned strategy? Let's take that one first, right? As an instrument, the mature market is typically more stable. It's typically more predictable, and therefore there's a bit more linearity. So mature markets, plans might actually work pretty well. The growing ones are more unstable, non-linear, and unpredictable. So as an instrument, emergent strategy is typically better. As a means for developing the strategies, play as a fertilizer for the brain are equally valid. So you should almost think of play as your way of developing the knowledge. Now, do you want to have knowledge that goes into a plan? And this is where we sometimes, when we use Lego Serious Play, but let's play in general. But sometimes we use Lego Serious Play with our clients for them to develop a better plan because they're in a market, they're in a situation which they feel is sufficiently stable for a plan. In other cases, we work with people that are in unstable markets, dynamic, unforeseeable, unpredictable, and complex markets. Here we help them with Lego Serious Play to develop an emergent strategy. So it's 2 different instruments and 1 way of developing knowledge. Now, then whether our market is immature or not, or that I think in itself is actually also, how do I phrase this, an unstable definition. I think lots of people have at moments felt that they were in mature markets, and then all of a sudden they find that they're not. I'm not an expert in banking, but I think if we go back, let's say 10 years, I think many banks felt that they were in a relatively mature and stable market. If you look at what happens now in fintech, I think banks are threatened on their life, basically. So I think a mature market, it's a state of the market. It's not the end state of the market.
Here, we have a question from Edgardo. How can you be sure when to change a strategy because things are not working out?
I wish I could give a perfect answer to that. I would be filthy rich. That's a really, really tricky question. I think you can only know it. I think there are two ways of actually knowing this. So it took me a moment, that one. The nature of the response from your clients. So are they starting to interact with you as if you are a commodity and easily substituted? The other thing is, I think the best way to know that you are still relevant is that your competitors are paying attention to you and copying what you're doing. The moment your competitors stop copying some of your actions, you know that you're not ahead. So always pay attention to your competitors, not for how they're moving away from you, but for how they're pursuing you. The moment you can see they're no longer pursuing you, so copying you or referring to you or benchmarking with you, well, then you know they probably moved past you. I hope that helps. And the other thing is, I mean, smart people have always said, the best thing you can always do is hire people that are smarter than yourself. This is the only way to stay ahead. If you're the smartest person in the room, you have an issue, because then someone else is hiring the smart people.
So we have another question about engaging with diverse talent. So it's in coronavirus, our government has not been willing to engage diverse group to develop the strategy to fight the virus. Can you comment on this? Engaging diverse talent? What happens if we do not engage with diverse talent?
I think what happens when you're not engaging with diverse talents can be seen right now in governmental actions in a number of places in the world. I mean, what I heard you say, Jack, is that you feel that your government is not engaging diverse talents in finding a solution. Is that true?
Yeah, that's, I guess.
Okay,
I thought, yes.
Okay, I thought that's what you said. And from my understanding, you guys are, I mean, Peru is going through a really difficult moment right now, right? So I think that might, I hope it works as an analogy, that might visualize the impact when you are engaging people who are not diverse. Because you don't get the different viewpoints, you don't get the different insights, you just see it in the same way. This is this notion of habitual patterns of thinking. I mean, we all have it. But if we're sitting with people who have the same patterns of thinking, we are just confirming each other in seeing the same thing and seeing absolutely nothing, therefore. So another way of saying that is by engaging as many different people, well, you can also say peoples, so you might have different tribes, who knows, but as many different people as possible, you see more of the world. Because we don't all see the same world. I mean, now let's not go too deep into philosophy and neuroscience here, but we literally don't see the same world, right? We see different things. And by engaging people, different age groups, different this, different that, not only primary differences, but by engaging most people, many people, we simply see more things. Now, this is not an easy conversation, but again, and I'm sorry to keep returning into play, but again, play is just immensely powerful because play transcends differences. Play transcends differences. Anyone who's brought their children on holiday to a different country will know exactly what we mean here. Right? If you go to Southern Europe in the summertime, right? Let's say you go to Greece. you're gonna have kids on the beach, and one of them is English, right? There's a Dane, there's a German, there's a Polish guy, and there's a Dutch guy. These are 4 different languages. These kids are playing together because they're in play. So they're transcending their differences. They're even transcending that they're not speaking the same language. This is a micro picture of what happens when we are in play. So when you are in that safe play state, remember Cole mentioned safety before. When you are in that safe play state, hierarchies disappear. This doesn't mean that the hierarchies aren't present after work when we start, at work when we start implementing this. But in that moment, in that space, we are transcending the hierarchies, the language, the distance between, or the difference between introverted or extroverted. So we go beyond, I hate to say going beyond diversity because it sounds like we're not making the most of it. But the point is we are making the most of it because the differences becomes, yeah, maybe the difference becomes diversity. It just becomes that we see different things. Hope that makes sense. Yeah.
So Susanna adds that this diversity is related to only the public sector perspective, only listening to their own public sector perspective and not enough from the private sector or other segments in this conversation. Yeah. So what happens if we do not engage in this conversation, public and private?
So my gut feeling is that then you end up with the wrong diagnosis of what's needed and therefore the wrong remedies.
I totally agree. I think the problem identifying will be weaker and you will lose the multidisciplinary problem solving that you need specifically for a pandemic like this. That would be very clear, and then you would basically just use the one hammer maybe, but not all problems are nails, not necessarily.
No, and another phrase we actually really often use is that if you're not part of the problem, you're not part of the solution. Yeah. In this context, that means like, so if you're not part of industry, how can you solve industry's problem? And then to be honest, I mean, we do consulting, but we also do a lot of, in our work, our line of work, frankly, we are rarely bored because we're industry specialists. We don't know the industry. We know the questions to ask, but the people in the industry, they know the answer. So they have the problem, so they have the answer. So what that would mean for you is to say, these public sector people, they shouldn't be solving this. They should be asking about the problem. They should be hearing what is needed and then finding ways of providing what's needed, not providing what's needed without asking the question because they're not in there, so they don't know it, is my gut feeling. But I'm luckily not a politician.
This is also related to the leadership styles that some people decide to have with their own groups, meaning.
Oh, yeah, but now we're getting into a whole new different conversation, which is really important, I think, with play, but also with strategy making. It's courage, because nothing takes more courage than asking a question. It takes a lot of courage to accept that you don't necessarily know everything, right? That is also leading. There's also taking responsibility. You take responsibility for the actions, but you also take responsibility by saying, the buck ends here, but I'm courageous enough to assume, to think that you, Jack, you know something that I don't know. Ignacio, you know something I don't know. I'm gonna ask, I'm gonna find out, and then I'm gonna help make decisions, because nobody can know everything. But very few people have the courage to accept that. Which is why sometimes people hire people that they're not afraid of, who are not as smart. But why hire someone if they're not better at you in a given thing? How can you then grow as a business?
Great. So, Jack, I think we don't have more questions.
There's one more that I read that might be important, which is, so I understand that hands are important.
Hands, yeah.
Hands are important in this. So in this time, in this social distancing time, Is there some ways to engage virtually with the hands?
There is. There are different softwares where you can do it virtually. Our preference is not virtual interactions, but remote interactions. Meaning that you're sitting. I have some Lego bricks somewhere near me, right? But that you're sitting in your private space and you develop knowledge, right? I have 2 Lego bricks here. That you're actually sitting in your private space, engaging your hands, because there is something about the tactile experience. And I want to give you an example. Cole, I hope you don't mind. I'm sharing a sort of business example that we are involved in. Cole and I and a third investor are currently exploring a startup with an app and blah, blah, blah. And we need to figure out, the proposition of this, the experience of this, the target customer for this, just to get started, right? And we couldn't physically be together, but each of us were sitting privately, building this, engaging our hands, accessing more parts of our brains, and just building what we thought it were. And then we made online and shared what we had built remotely. So all things equal, I think, do it, engage your hands tactile where you are, and then share online and share remotely. I think that's how I would, all things equal. But there are, do it. I mean, but there are, certain softwares where you do it in 2D manner, but there's something about the tactile, just touching things. This is also why, and I know this is not correct to say in these COVID-19 days, but food that you eat with your hands tastes better. Because touching the food prepares your brain, which prepares your taste buds, which gives you a stronger taste experience. We are really simple beings. I hope that helps.
Right.
And of course, let me just add one thing. And this is not related to the topic of strategy, but more related to the notion of play and the need for play in children, especially, that I've seen. Like my daughter, the other day, I saw her playing with her Barbies through a Zoom call. And she was engaging with her friends and showing her friends what she was doing with her Barbie dolls. And that's a different topic, of course. That's not a strategy, but that's a way that they are adapting to satisfy that need.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and we do have that need. I mean, and we do have it as adults as well. Good, Ignacio, you're ready to take the hosting away from me and throw me off the Zoom calls. So that's absolutely fine. We just wanted to remind people that if they want to reach out, I mean, I am on LinkedIn and we'd love to talk to you. And we did a short article where we explain more what we did. So just sort of wrapping up with that, Ignacio. And now we'll be quiet.
Great. So Per, Kerr, and Jack, thanks a lot. I think it was great to have you with us. Obviously, you can connect with Jack, with Kerr, with Per too. I know we will send in some articles they wrote to you, and if you're interested, obviously. And thanks a lot. It was a pleasure for us to have you. And let's stay connected and stay safe. Muchas gracias a todos por participar y que tengan un buen jueves.